Well, friends, it has been a long week for me over here at the homestead. We're getting ready to go back to school. And if you guys don't know, I work in education. So we're getting all that ready for all our students to come on in. And I've been busy. With that said, stay tuned. I'm excited. Let's do it.
Hey Brian, you ready to talk comics?
Definitely.
Let's jump right into it. I think we said our topic was going to be Marvel comics.
Yes.
All right. Before Marvel was called Marvel, they were actually called Timely Comics. And this is their first book. It's called Marvel Comics, and that's where later the name Marvel came from. This is their first book, came out in November of 1939. This introduced brand new characters like the Human Torch, Submariner, the Angel, the Masked Raider, Kazar.
Really stinking cool cover. And so many brand new characters all in one magazine.
Yeah, and this was really off of the success that DC had with Superman, Batman. Fawcett Comics had Captain Marvel, which we talked about the last time.
Right.
So yeah, this new publisher decided they wanted to take a shot at it. This was in 1939. I don't remember what the exact numbers were that they sold, but I believe it was around 800,000 copies back then.
Back then. Wow. Now, with so many copies, I'm going to go off on a little tangent here. How many of those you think survived, especially after? And I'm jumping ahead a little bit. All the stuff with the comics code.
Most of these ended up getting destroyed because they weren't meant to be collector's items when they came out. They were meant to just be read and tossed out. They were kind of like the pulps that we talked about in one of the early episodes.
Sure.
Poor quality paper, not really meant for longevity. You got that factored in with the recycling during World War II.
Okay.
They really pushed the recycling for the war effort. So a lot of people turned in newspapers, comic books that all got destroyed and recycled. You mentioned the comics code. There were a lot of comic book burnings in the 50s. So most of these didn't survive.
That being said, what kind of price level are we looking at?
For high grade copies, easily in the six figures.
Wow. Looking at the cover, what's going on here? It looks like our hero is coming out of something metal. Do we know what's going on there?
I've never read it. Even though they're superheroes, they're meant to be more mystery type, because in fact the name does change to Marvel Mystery Comics. Yeah, more of like a not quite horror, but not quite fun and games like DC Comics were.
Right.
And I think you've seen the trend of that throughout the years, where DC Comics were a little more kid friendly.
Yes, sir.
Marvel had the deeper, more older reader storylines.
Yep.
And that shows even from back in the day. Moving on, with the success of Marvel Comics, they came out with a book called Red Raven. This came out in August of 1940.
Interesting looking cover. I've never heard of Red Raven.
That's because it didn't last. The characters didn't take, ended up not working out, so they only did the one issue.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
But the somewhat significance of this issue I'll show you next, is again, the character didn't do very well, so they really weren't wanting to continue this. So for number 2, they introduced the Human Torch.
Oh, that's someone I know.
And completely changed the name of the book.
Wow. And you get the Submariner there too.
Yeah, because he had come out in the Marvel Comics #1, so he had already been in play. This book came out in the fall of 1940.
Okay.
Chronological order, this is Human Torch #1, but it's considered a #2 because it follows the Red Raven comic.
Huh.
A little confusing.
Little bit.
But, a little bit of interesting history there.
Huh.
And as you can see, 1940, Europe had already just started into World War II. As you can see, you got the little Nazi ship there with the little swastika on the flag.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. There's a whole collector thing for those, anything with the Nazis on the cover.
Oh, absolutely. Because, the whole PC and cancel culture thing has started long, long ago. People say it's a big thing now, but it's been going on for decades. Way back in the day, it became a taboo to have that on the cover of anything.
Oh,
wow.
wow.
Look at it now. Anybody even shows a hint of something like that, people are up in arms about it.
Sure.
But you got to remember, this is back in the time when this was all over the news because the Nazis were trying to take over the world.
Literally.
Yeah.
The Submariner. Wow, he looks different. But he's still the same, you were telling me earlier?
Yeah, he's the same Submariner.
Wow. And he was the first mutant?
As far as the timeline of the comics coming out, yeah, he is, because the Marvel Comics #1 came out in 1939.
Right.
That is the first Marvel comic, and he came out in their first issue.
Wow.
And nobody had done mutants before Marvel.
That's right.
Although, interesting tidbit, the word mutant didn't come around until X-Men #1 in 1963.
Oh, wow.
And it was revealed later that Namor or Submariner was a mutant.
Huh. I gotta be honest with you, I can't wait until he comes out onto the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
I hope they do it right.
Me too. Me too. I got that #1 issue, so.
So there's a reason why you want it to do well.
Just a little bit.
I don't remember if we touched on it, but most, if not all, of the comic creators were Jewish.
Yes, we did. Yeah, which is a very interesting aspect of this whole thing, especially when you get into the World War II.
Yeah, so a lot of them had friends and family still in Europe that were directly being affected by what was going on with the war. And being in America, who hadn't joined the war yet, they felt very helpless, and there wasn't much they could do to support their friends and family and countrymen.
Yeah.
Which is why two gentlemen by the names of Jack Kirby and Joe Simon came up with Captain America.
Wow.
In March of 1941. So this is pre-U.S. involvement in World War II.
Okay.
But comic book creators felt like they wanted to show their support of fighting against the Nazis. And you don't get more prolific than Captain America socking Hitler in the jaw. And I don't care how deep cancel culture goes, this cover should never be canceled.
I have to agree with you, sir. That makes a statement right from jump.
Right from the get-go. So yeah, Captain America was created solely to fight Germany and the Nazis. Mm-hmm. That was their intent.
They called some people some names that wouldn't stand for today's nomenclature, if you will.
Oh, for sure. But it was of the time, and comics were just a form of propaganda. Just like in Europe, the Germans had their propaganda depicting Americans as monsters and beasts, and every other country does that. Americans are always portrayed as monsters and in a negative light. So it's no different that American propaganda would be the same thing. Another reason for the comics too was comic books had become a large media for the troops overseas. So for them to receive books of superheroes fighting against the same enemies that they're fighting against was good for morale.
Yeah, disposable entertainment.
Yeah, absolutely. When you're in a foxhole somewhere in a bunker and you need to be entertained, what better than a comic book?
Hey.
Or maybe a dirty magazine, but I prefer the comic book. So following in the same vein, The rest of the characters started jumping into the war effort. So here you have Submariner fighting against the Nazis.
Wow.
And this came out in spring of 1941.
That is really a great cover. Wow. The Submariner. The look of him, it just made him look very exotic. More so than now.
Because when they introduced him, he wasn't meant to have been an Earth person or, a human being, a normal human being.
Right.
He came from Atlantis. He's almost like a different race, so he's an Atlantean.
Right.
And since this is early on, if you zoom into like the pictures of the Nazis, they still look normal, like normal human beings.
Yes.
I should have gotten some examples, but later, especially after the bombing of Pearl Harbor,
okay,
if you can ever come across issues, you'll notice that the facial features start to change.
Oh, really?
On not only the Nazis but the Japanese, because of after Pearl Harbor, you'll notice that their faces start turning more grotesque and monster-like. Again, propaganda. That's what it really was. These are the enemies. The Americans are the good guys, and it's all about boosting morale.
I could see this being that sort of continuing that mantra of us against them.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that was the mindset of the time. Then, again, we talked about the bombing of Pearl Harbor. It wasn't long after that the war had ended. And once the war ended, a lot of these superheroes were out of work, so to say, because they had nobody to fight. Captain America had no Nazis or, Japs, as they called them back in the day, to fight. So what did it do with these characters now? A lot of them just fell by the wayside and just disappeared. They tried to keep Captain America going, but there were just no good stories. And his book eventually evolved into Captain America's Weird Tales.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
In fact, this was the last issue that came out in February of 1950.
Oh, my goodness.
They actually ended Captain America because they ran out of ideas for him. Yeah. But you look at this, Captain America's Weird Tales. I don't see Captain America on the cover.
No, you don't. So, if that's the end of the Cap and Bucky, where do we go to now?
Well, they did try to revive Cap and Bucky in, I believe it was 1954. They brought him back. They did some other titles like All American and some other off titles. And again, it just didn't take because the stories ended up being goofy, kind of like how DC evolved into just not knowing what to do with the characters. Once the superhero fad had kind of died out, horror and sci-fi became the big thing.
Big love and shout out to my boy Derek Oyama over there at Legends, Comics and Games for another interesting and deep dive into the comic book industry. Hit that bell so you know when we're dropping new content. Also, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe and leave a comment. We love to hear what you guys have to say about the videos. Until then, have a great day. We'll see you soon. All right, bye.